We're getting ready to work on number 10 on page 5 of our 4.2 notes. So as I said earlier on the other examples, first copy what's in your first parenthesis, making sure it's in descending order. 10/11 x to the fourth plus 2/3 x squared plus 1/5. Then I see the negative sign, so I put my 1 in. I draw my arrows so I don't forget to distribute to everything, and I get negative 4/11 x to the fourth, negative 1/6 x squared, and then a negative times a negative, positive 1/5. And I think we can do all of these. And maybe you want to do this one on the calculator because it doesn't have common denominators, but see how this does. In my head, I go times 2 times 2, 4, 6, minus 1, 6 is 3, 6, which is 1/2. If you can't do that in your head, that's okay. Do it on the calculator. So first one, 10/11 minus 4/11 would be 7. Whoops. Hi, Kim. 6/11 x to the fourth. So 10 minus 4 is 6. Keep the denominator. So 6/11 x to the fourth. Then on our calculator, we can do 2/3 minus 1/6. So 2 fraction bar 3. Wow. Minus 1 fraction bar 6, and there's that 1/2 we were talking about. Remember what I said? Times 2 times 2, that's 4, 6. Minus 1, 6 is 3, 6, but 3, 6 simplifies to 1/2. Bingo! Keep the sign of the larger so it's positive, plus our calculator told us it was positive as well. So positive 1/2 x squared. And then last, 1/5 plus 1/5 is 2/5. So that one was a lot easier than it looked. It looked ugly, but it actually ended up being really nice and easy. And then, like I said, all your answers do have to be in descending order, which this one is, x to the fourth, x to the second, no x. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to page 6. Okay, so page 6, we're going to talk about polynomial functions. So a polynomial function, in fact, this entire chapter is on polynomial functions, so it's good that they're telling us what we're studying now. They're of the form ax to the n. So a can be any real number, square root 2, square root 5, negative 7, 2.8, negative 3.9. So any real number for a, which is called the coefficient we learned in the last section. But n, the exponent, can only be a whole number. Whole numbers are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So those are the only numbers that our exponent can be. They can't be decimals to be a polynomial. They can't be negative numbers. So it has to either be 0 or a positive whole number in order to be a polynomial. So if you see a fraction as an exponent, it's not a polynomial. If you see a decimal as an exponent, it's not a polynomial. If you see a negative number as an exponent, it's not a polynomial. So here's some examples of things that are polynomials. So on this first one, our exponent is 2 and our exponent's 1. Those are whole numbers, so we're good. And this is the same thing as 12x to the 0th. Remember, it has 0 x's because x to the 0th is 1. So think of it like this. X to the 0th is 1. 12 times 1 is 12. So this does have an x. We just don't write it because it's to the 0th power. Remember in the last section, 4.1, we learn anything to the 0th is 1. So 12 times 1 is 12. So anytime the exponent's 0, we just don't write it because that means it's just a 1. So 0 is a whole number, so that would be considered a polynomial. But here's some things that aren't polynomials. So you look at the exponents and you go, well, that's a 2 and that's a 1. That's okay. Well, we learned in the last section, and if you haven't watched your videos on 4.1, please watch them because you will be so lost when it comes to exponents later. So 4.1's kind of the foundation for the exponent rules, and then we just keep talking about them throughout the chapter, throughout the book. So if you did not watch the videos from 4.1, watch those. Otherwise, when I start talking about stuff like this, you'll be like, huh? So yes, those are whole numbers, but when we bring the x up, we learned in the last section, that means it changes the sign of the exponent. So it's x to the first in the denominator, but when we bring it up, it's x to the negative 1, and negative 1 is not a whole number. So we worked yesterday on if it was negative here, bringing it down to make it positive. Well, the opposite is also true. If it's positive in the denominator, when we bring it up, it changes sign and becomes negative. So this would not be a polynomial because it has a negative exponent when we take it out of fraction form. And this we learned in our library of functions in 2.6 and 2.7 from the prerequisite chapters is a v. It's called an absolute value function. And polynomial functions are nice smooth curves, not any v's. So that's why that is not a polynomial. So basically you can't have x's in the denominator. You can't have absolute value. Make sure all your exponents are whole numbers. Okay. So next section is a review. I've already worked it out because you guys already know how to do it. So I would like you to stop the video and work these 4 problems out, and then we'll compare our answers together. Because this is what you learned in the prerequisite review, was how to evaluate a function. So they would say like find f of 2, and that's what they want you to find here. So plug 2 in and evaluate the function. Okay. So for this one, f of 2 is everywhere we see an x, put in 2, 2 squared plus 4 times 2 minus 1. And I wrote here that you could have also written it instead of with parentheses with times signs because 2 is positive. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 2 is positive 8 minus 1. 12 minus 1 is 11. And then I wrote a reminder here. We learned in the prerequisite review chapter that this represents the point 211. So this is my answer because it says evaluate the function. So this is evaluating the function, but I just want you to keep in mind that that answer indicates that point is on the line because whatever's in parentheses is your x and your answer or your output is your y of the ordered pair. Okay, so now it's time to turn off the video, work the 4 upcoming problems, and then turn it back on and we can compare answers. Okay, so for the first one, remember in the prerequisites chapter, we learned that anytime you input a negative, it must be in parentheses. So this is 3 parentheses negative 1 squared minus 7 parentheses negative 1 plus 5. The calculator will give you the wrong answer if you don't have parentheses. So if a negative number is input, that means is the x, write it with parentheses around it. And then just to show you the calculator work, I think by now you guys all know how to use your calculator, but so 3 parentheses negative 1, close your parentheses, then hit your squared button, subtraction 7 parentheses, -1, close your parentheses, plus 5. And there's where we get the 15. For the next one, f of 0, we have 3 times 0 squared minus 7 times 0 plus 5. And then I wrote here 0 times 3 is 0, minus 7 times 0, which is 0, plus 5. So 0 minus 0 plus 5 is 5. And remember, they're only asking for the function value. That's why I don't have the ordered pair there as well. But just know that that means the 0.05 is on the graph. And you can do that in your head or by calculator, whatever works. Okay, so next we have 1/2. And just like negatives, we learned in the last chapter that 1/2 has to be in parentheses when you input it as well. Otherwise, the exponent will only go with the denominator. So this is how you write it. 3 parentheses 1/2 squared minus 7 parentheses 1/2 plus 5. Then again, we go to the calculator. So let me get out of that bright light. So 3 parentheses 1 fraction bar 2 close, hit your squared button. Then we have subtract 7 parentheses 1 fraction bar 2 close plus 5. And that gives me 2 1/4. Well, when I was taking the test the other night in Alex, I saw that 2 of the problems said write your answer as a simplified fraction. So that means it would count this wrong because this is called a simplified mixed number. So read your directions carefully when you're taking your Alex test and make sure you're giving it in the form they want. So we learned on the calculator how to change that to a fraction. Remember this, look at the blue. That says mixed number to fraction. It says A, B over C, 2, D over E. So since it's in blue, we hit second fraction. And if Alex asks you for a simplified fraction, then you would want to write 9/4. So this is called a simplified mixed number. This is called a simplified fraction. So make sure that you read the directions and give the answer in the order that they, or in the form that they want you to. Okay. And then last we have f of 2. So f of 2, whoops, I got the function out of there, is 3 times 2 squared minus 7 times 2 plus 5. This one I just did by hand. So 3 times 4, because you do exponents first, is 12, minus 14 plus 5. -2 plus 5 is 3. So that is how you do it by hand. Of course, you could have typed it in the calculator, but it was so easy. I just thought I'm just going to do that one by hand. Okay, the last problem is asking us to write an equation for profit. So the cost in dollars of producing iPhone cases is this. So this is the function for the cost in dollars. The revenue, that means the money coming in for selling the iPhone cases, is this. So evidently we're selling them for $15, right? So $15 times how many we sell. This tells me they cost $5.50 to produce each, and the $69, who knows what that could be, I don't know. But that tells me it's $5.50 each it costs to produce them. This tells me they sell them for $15, and then there's some unknown number there. We don't know what that represents that gets taken away from the cost. Maybe a discount, I don't know. So to calculate the profit, and this is the key, And it looks like